What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Axe Creation. Today we're going to look at some creative ways of how we can incorporate the diminished scale into our riff writing. So before we get started on breaking down the riff or ways to incorporate it, first we have to learn what is the diminished scale. And it's a real simple series of half and whole steps. So if we started off of B, our next note is going to be on the first fret C, right? So there's our half step, and then from there it's a whole step, and then that just repeats. So it's half step, move up a whole step, and then play two half, move up a whole step, right? And that is the half-whole diminished scale. And there's a lot of cool things about this. It's a symmetrical scale. It actually has 8 notes instead of 7. And when I say symmetrical, it's just the mirror of each other. So if we play B, we can play a couple different chord qualities off of the same roots, which makes the scale really interesting and really creative. So there is a functional way that you'll find in, say, jazz or blues, and where this scale is used over a dominant chord. And it's considered, so if we're in B, that means we'd have B7, right? And that chord, this dominant 7 chord, can repeat a minor third apart, or on the fretboard, 4 frets. So I can go to 7, move up to 10 and play the same thing. Move up to 13, and move up to 16, or right? So that's one way to help you visualize the scale across your fretboard. So you can play the dominant 7 chord here, and then on the half step up from that, you can play a diminished chord. And then that sequence will be mirrored every 4 frets. So we have dominant chord, diminished chord. Right? And that sequence can be mirrored all over the place. So that's one more of the functional ways if you play fusion or jazz or blues, but we're not doing that. We're obviously, as you heard in the beginning, we're writing some metal riffs here. Another way that you can look at this scale is more of, and that's kind of how I composed the example that I wanted to present to you, is more of a, these are the notes I can play on the guitar. And so with the intro of the riff and all the heavy parts, there were no other notes used besides the notes in the diminished scale. So obviously I was basing it off of B, right? And I'm using it more maybe a tone row, for those of you familiar with like atonal composition, but without the regulations or limitations that is in atonal writing. This is more of, these are the notes I can use, let me find cool chords and cool voicings that I like, right? So a couple cool voices, you can play the open B obviously, and then the octave. Here's our major triad here, major third. So off of all those dominant 7 roots, the B, the D, the F, and the A flat, I can play a major triad, as I said before, and then we can add the tritone to that, right? A very Lydian type sound, or a sharp 4. Right, obviously that flat 2 is going to be real strong, but we can do that and create ideas off of that. So if you wanted to do something like that, you can incorporate it into whatever riff you want to try to kind of some thematic or motif going on. Right? Cool voicing that I like to use, take that same shape, play the octave of the root, so it's 7, 9, and then the octave of the 6 and the 8, right? Add the open B. Get a real B major sound, right? But again, I can move this chord up. Or I can move it down. And obviously, depending on where you play it, your dissonances or your tensions are going to be a lot stronger. Right? So in the riff, I'm basically playing off, I start off with the little tritone shape. But you don't know it, it's 6 on one string, 7 on the next string. And it doesn't matter what frets you have, or it's a power chord down a half step. Right? That's the tritone shape. And if you're ever coming up with a melody, say you're playing on one string, and you want to get off of that one string and you're not so familiar with the notes on your fretboard, you can always just, it's a tritone away. A note on the next string is a tritone away. And no matter where you are on the fretboard, it's a tritone away or a tritone down. And you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. Right? So I'm just playing a tritone, and then I'm taking that somewhat thematic concept, keeping the B the same and moving around it. Right? And then the fill, it's just a little A flat diminished chord, 4, 5, 6, and then a B minor chord. And I just step down the scale. You know, so my goal here is not to initially teach you the example that I showed you. You can download the tabs for it, the links are in the description. It's just more of kind of talking about maybe my thought process through that, and maybe hopefully you can get out of that some ways to incorporate it into your own writing. Right? So some of the all right, that's considered the second riff that was played. So you can look at that as 3rd fret of my low B, I'm playing a diminished chord. Right? But I know that I have B and a half step above it. Right? So I can jump up the octave and then go down that arpeggio. Right? Some really fun ways. And then the outro of the riff, which I was going to put a solo on it, but I figured this is a riff writing lesson, so why solo over it? Right, I'm just taking that thematic idea we did before and strumming through those chords that we talked about earlier. As for the intro, right, I took this nice, ugly major 7 interval on the high strings. We have a C here and a B here. And obviously the open B. Again, all these notes are just in the scale. And I step that down. I step that down. Right? None of those notes are outside of the half-whole diminished scale that I use, the A flat or the F member symmetrical, so the root is all the same. So in that aspect, I encourage you to explore the scale, but not necessarily in maybe 3-note per string, shreddy scale ideas. Try to experiment with some chords and some different voicings and find intervals and patterns within the scale that resonate with you and that help you write some better riffs. So, like I said earlier, the link for the tab is in the description below. Check it out, check out the riff. See what I'm talking about? I'll add some scale patterns in there just so you can see it. And as always, let me know what you come up with. So until then, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks a lot.